Good morning, County Council. We'll call the meeting to order. Rise as you're able, and we'll sing "O Canada."
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Before we begin, I want to acknowledge we are meeting today on the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Saugeen Métis, Six Nations of the Grand River, and the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. May we all be mindful and respectful of each other as we travel together on our journey of reconciliation. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll call, please?
Councillor Mackey.
Present.
Councillor McKay. Councillor Carlton. Councillor Pringle. Councillor McQueen. Councillor Nielsen.
Present.
Councillor Patterson. Councillor Dickert. Councillor Kentner. Councillor Keaveney. Councillor Body. Councillor Gregg. Warden Milne.
Present.
Councillor Dobreen. Councillor Matrosovs. Councillor Bourdignon.
Present.
Councillor Echols. Councillor Hutchinson.
Present.
We have all members participating today.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any declaration of interest related to any matter on today's agenda? Not seeing any. If one should arise during the course of the meeting, we can deal with it at that time. Items for direction and discussion. The first this morning is the report from the CAO regarding 2024 proposed spending reductions. Would someone care to move that, please? Councillor Gregg, seconded by Councillor Pringle. Just while Kim's coming to the microphone, I want to welcome Councillor Matrosovs back home to this part of the world. It's always nice to have everybody at home. Kim.
Thank you and good morning, Council. The report before you this morning proposes a number of spending reductions, some of which have been discussed previously, some of which staff have been able to determine since we last spoke. As well, I am proposing the formation of a budget and finance committee to be struck in 2024. So with regard to the spending reductions, this report provides an updated list of spending reductions for Council's consideration. These reductions were developed based on the Council direction provided at the preliminary budget overview meetings held October 21st and then again on November 3rd and 9th. If these changes are adopted, the 2024 levy would be reduced to $5,297,395, which represents a 7.62% increase over 2023. So the items that are listed in the report, I can give you a little bit of background on some of those just for clarity. The first one on the list is to reduce the legal services, professional services line. Changes in this department resulted in shifting funds from salary and wages down to professional services. And for 2024, as we pilot a new operating model for that department, staff feel we can reduce the professional services line by $100,000, still leaving sufficient funds in that budget for obtaining external support as we need it. Another item that we've talked about is the healthcare initiatives line. The draft budget at this time includes 509,000 as per the policy of 0.75%. Staff are recommending dropping this contribution by $300,000 for 2024 with a $209,000 commitment. In addition to the 200,000 that's in reserves, the county will be able to meet its obligations to Bright Shores, the hospice request for $10,000 a year for 3 years, as well as providing some funding for community partners, as council may direct over the course of the year. The next item is $315,000 related to the health unit budget. As council is aware, Grey and Bruce counties are responsible for supporting 25% of the health unit budget, with the remaining 75% coming from the province. Excuse me. It was brought to our attention very recently that the province is providing mitigation funding to the health unit. I'm also aware that the health unit has not yet had an opportunity to discuss their budget at length. This reduction recognizes mitigation funding that the health unit is receiving from the province. Bruce County has budgeted the same way as what we are proposing here. I'll leave that to you to consider. Moving on, the staff wellness budget, as was discussed earlier, that budget could be maintained at the 2023 level, which would be a reduction of $14,000. Next is a finance transfer to reserve for future software. As we've discussed earlier, our Great Plains financial software is reaching the end of its life. We don't at this time have a reserve to cover a future purchase of financial software. However, rather than fund this reserve requirement from levy, we propose to use some of the 2023 surplus to cover that off. Next is a climate change transfer to reserve. The climate change team has been successful with some grant applications recently, which is wonderful. And we intend to continue working hard to seek external funding in the future. Staff feel we can remove this transfer to reserve or make this reduction to transfer to reserve with no impact to the project work that we intend to complete in 2024. The Buckthorn project in the county forests, certainly staff recommend that project continue on. However, we can fund that from reserve rather than from the levy this year. The 14th Street project, also a previous discussion. There is a balance owing, and we had an opportunity to either debenture that amount or to pay it off outright. Staff recommend paying off the balance owing from one-time funding and avoiding the annual debenture payment hitting the levy. The next one, paramedic services changed to iPads from laptops, is just a good cost saving. It won't impact our services. Transportation services had offered a change to their budget rather than purchasing a used bucket truck and a levy implication of $52,900. We will continue to use a tree service in 2024. With regard to the skid steer item, which is next on the list, our current skid steer is, I think, one of our most heavily used pieces of equipment. Staff was looking at starting to build up a reserve to have a second one. We can defer that decision to a future date and reduce the contribution to reserve towards that for this year in the amount of $23,200. Again, another item that's been discussed is the transfer to reserve for electric vehicles. We are installing chargers this year, and we are holding off on our electric vehicle purchases, both due to price and availability concerns. So I think in concert with that, we can hold off on the transfer to reserve for this time. The next item is about paramedic services, and a few months ago, we heard about the deployment review and the recommended investments and changes to paramedic services in order to keep up with the increasing call volume. Director McNabb's been able to use the evaluations analysis software from ORH to determine the impact of some changes that would allow us to still meet our commitments, but reduce the overall cost to the county. So this $116,900 it represents the contribution that the county would have made to those changes every year for 11 years. Kevin can speak in more detail to this, but I believe this the basis of it is the reduction of the base in Holstein, as well as some changes to the proposed staffing model in the future. Transportation services. The budget included a $26,000 increase in training and travel for transportation. And the proposal here is to just reduce that increase by 50%. Pat and his staff are advocating with OGRA to continue to offer courses, at least some courses, via remote basis. It works well for us, and so we hope that we can do that, and that this reduction will not have too significant of a negative impact on our ability to make sure staff have the training that they need. There's an innovation equipment budget that's proposed to be reduced. The same with non-licensed equipment. And after that, it's clerks, the document management software. We just implemented SharePoint, or are just implementing SharePoint this year. We can probably hold off on a reserve contribution for replacing it for at least 2024. The next item is scheduling software. We have accepted a vendor to implement a new human resource information system, and through that procurement process have identified that we will be able to meet our scheduling needs in the near term without this $40,000 in additional costs. So that's really good news. We can hold off on that. Similar to the SharePoint discussion, because we're just implementing the new HRIS, we think it's prudent to hold off on the transfer to reserve to replace that software that's just coming in, at least for 2024. With regard to a transfer to reserve for non-union compensation, we were able to complete that review this year for less than what had been budgeted. It's been a long time since we've done one, so we weren't entirely sure how much it was going to cost. We did come in under budget, and we can reduce the transfer by the $5,000 and still have sufficient money to be able to do the next review in a few years. There was an increase proposed to corporate management training at $35,000. We can eliminate that increase this year and hold the budget at the current level. And then finally, we are advised of some additional provincial funding coming our way. It's still embargoed, so we can talk about it in closed. But that $267,800 is new money or additional funding that's coming to us. So those reductions in total amount to $1,630,500 and reduce the levy increase by 2.35%. So are there any questions about this?
Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Good morning, County Council. Thanks very much, Kim, for all this information. When you spoke about the healthcare initiatives and the reduction of 300,000, you don't believe that's going to leave us handcuffed when legitimate requests come forward to council for consideration over the next year? I'm concerned a little bit by the level of that reduction, taking it from 0.75%, which is what, 509,000. So we're only at 209. There is a little bit in the reserve, I guess. Is that the money that, if there is a request coming forward, that you feel council would be able to make determinations on?
Thank you for the question. So our commitment to Bright Shores is $200,000. The hospice was looking for $10,000 a year for 3 years. And that, basically leaves us with $100,000 of flex. The healthcare initiatives funding, the way that the policy was originally developed was meant to provide for capital requirements, and the policy goes on to say that we need to hear about any new capital requirements by June of the current fiscal year, and that those items received would then be considered in the following year's budget. So under the terms of the policy as it's written at this time, we're not aware of any new capital requirements at this time. And should those come in the first 6 months of the year, we'd have the ability to consider those and put them into the budget. So you do have that $100,000 worth of flexibility, and I guess we're hopeful that we can manage with that in the short term. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Gregg?
Thanks, Warden. I just want to thank him and staff for presenting it in this method to us to start off here today. I heard lots of comments about how big this document is, the volume of numbers contained within it. So I think what you've done is well laid out here in front of us in terms of being able to get started and find some traction to move forward here today. It's not that we're looking for a specific number at the end of the day. We're looking for long-term financial sustainability. And it's going to be a long discussion before we land at that proper place. Also, gladly supportive, more than happy to have supported the motion to bring forward terms of reference for a finance committee. I spoke in October when we first had the first discussion that through the year, we kind of lacked that cohesive mechanism in place to be able to bring the volume of ideas or initiatives forward in terms of something that then sheds some light on where it's going to land us at the end of the year. And certainly a budget committee will help guide us in this process, which is a difficult process as we're all finding this year. So I think we've got two really good starting points moving forward here this morning at 10 o'clock. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Any other questions so far? Councillor Eccles?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And the one that's troubling to me is the health unit increase. So is it at the 70-30 and that 315 isn't supposed to be in there, or is it 75-25? And are we sure of that without even the health unit's budget coming forward yet?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So the information that was in, that's contained in the budget that's before you was provided by the health unit, probably September, October. Recently, they've came back and advised that there is mitigation funding that they're going to receive from the province. So our contribution would not be increasing to what we had budgeted. And as Kim's mentioned, Bruce County has already passed their budget. So they passed a budget based on what they've been paying in the past with a slight increase. And of course, Board of Health has not seen the budget yet. I believe your meeting is in January. So what we're proposing is we remove the increase that we had been budgeting. And if there is further discussion with the health unit and the board passes an increase that's beyond what we have, we'll recommend that we fund that from safe restart funding.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Does that answer the question, Councillor Eccles?
It answers the question from Grey County side, yes. But I think there'll be more questions at the health unit side. So Thank you.
Yeah, I would anticipate that for sure. Any other questions? Counselor Nielsen, sorry.
Thank you very much, Warden. I have a question regarding the 116,900 for the enhanced recommendations for the deployment review of paramedic services. If we pass the motion that's on the table, then I guess this reduction would already be taking place. Would it be helpful if we can get some kind of a clarity as to what this would implement and change? There were some significant changes in that review that would have an increase in stations and deployment across the county. So I'm just wondering if Kevin can give some more clarity to this one.
I'm sure you can. Kevin, morning.
Morning, County Council. So I'll give you the what the initial recommendation was, and then we'll go from what what we come up as an alternate plan. So we presented in report PSR CWO 623, our projected call volume would increase 5.8% annually over or 68% over the next 10 years, which would result in 672 hours or roughly 8 12-hour shifts to maintain response times. With the 3 of these shifts would have been recommended in 2022, where we're at with call volumes. But because of budgeting and where we were with the review, we moved it to be phased in starting in 2024. To accommodate the additional vehicles and improve upon response times further, staff recommended the construction of 5 additional bases not previously included over the 10-year capital plan. Our goal of these bases is to have a standard template design that meets the needs of the service, but also achieve some efficiencies by doing that same base build wherever we build throughout the county. To put this plan into operation based upon the current information and assumptions, staff estimate that a 489,400 annual levy increase is needed over the next 11 years and will be required with the first increase included in the 2024 budget. The enhancements proposed in 2024 include the addition of 2 12-hour shifts. This is in Owen Sound, Hanover. This will be the start of the enhancement. This will result in 8 additional full-time paramedics plus their backfill hours. The enhancements also include a contribution to reserve to fund the purchase of additional ambulances and equipment that will be required to operate the additional 12-hour shifts. In 2024, these costs would total $2,113,600, which are funded by $489,400 from levy, and the balance from reserve to smooth the costs of the increase over the next 11 years. The majority of these expenses would be covered by 50-50 funding, and we also try to mitigate the in-year costs by not starting the enhancement till July, because the government will pay 50-50 based upon the previous year's actions. So just when we're looking at cost savings and an alternate deployment plan, we're also being proposed today to achieve savings and at the same time to continue to meet increase in call volumes and maintain response time. For the 2023 year to December 1st, we've completed 13,203 calls for service, which is an increase of 192 calls over 2022, which is roughly a 1.4% increase. To December 1st, 2023, we are meeting our individual CTAS response times, and our 90th percentile for code 4 calls is 1538, with our goal as being 15 minutes or less. Using the ORH modeling tool and adjusting for a higher than predicted call volume in 2022, because when they predicted it, their prediction was a bit lower than what it was. And then their prediction for 2023 is actually quite a bit lower, or quite a bit higher. And we're predicting a 1%, the actual was 1.4. We ran a new model in 2025 and 2033 to see what that would look like with a modified plan. The modified plan consists of the following. We would delay upstaffing Meaford in 2025 and keep the first response unit until 2027. So there would be 2 cars in 2024 added, 1 car in 2025, and instead of the second car, we'd actually just keep the first response unit till 2027. We would remove the Durham car and the Holstein base in 2029. In 2033, the upstaffing at Craigleith would only be on weekends. There's no impact to response time, but we removed a supervisor position in 2029. And because of the less shifts, we removed 3 ambulances from the capital budget. With a 1% increase, we ran through the modeling 2023, and then we carried on with the modeling at the average of what recommended at 5.8 over the next 10 years. And going forward, when we run the modeling, our response time will be 90% in 15 minutes, right on the money. So I don't know how it actually got to 90%, but that's kind of the best. It actually worked out quite well, and that's our goal is to make 90% 15 minutes. There is some response time impact in Meaford and Blue Mountains in 2025. But one thing we didn't do in the modeling, we didn't move the FRU from Markdale to Meaford. So that's something that we would do, we move the FRU to that area. And then also in 2033, there is an impact in Meaford and also in West Grey because we didn't do the upstaff in Durham. But that's something that, you know, it is out, you know, quite a ways, like 2029 and beyond. And we will continue to monitor those impacts and bring that information back to council. Overall, the savings with this is 116,000 yearly, with the total enhancement now being reduced to 372,500. So really, just in sum it all up, we were adding 8 12-hour cars over the next 10 years. We're dropping it to 6 cars plus 2 out of 7 days. And again, that does meet with our modeling the way it is and with the reduction we've seen this year. The only risk is some years we see a 1%, and other years we see a 13. You know, over the last 5 years, we've had about a 33% increase in calls. So, but with the modeling tool now, we can still continue to keep an eye on it. I think this plan sets us in the right direction for getting those cars up front, like we've been asking for through the plan, and then it allows us to monitor as we go ahead.
Thank you. Dane, does that answer the question?
Thank you, Warden. That was a really good response, Kevin. I appreciate the effort that's been put into this. Just when I was looking at it, my concern was that as we're seeing the growth come, and we want to make sure that we're prepared and safe in Grey County across the entire region, and the paramedic services do provide. We're trying our best to provide a high level of service. So I appreciate the effort from staff, and thank you very much for the response.
Thank you, Dane. Any other? Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Good morning, everyone. I wanted to ask about the removal of the used bucket truck. Kim mentioned that we'd be contracting out that service, and I'm just wondering, do we have a sense of the cost of that service and how many years it would take through, you know, covering the contract to pay for the used truck?
Know that that's the way that that we do take care of that requirement at this time. I don't know, Pat, do you know? I don't exactly what we've spent on contracted services specific to tree trimming. Go ahead, Kat.
Pat, do you want to go out on a limb and answer that?
It's definitely out on a limb, yeah. I think part of it that I just wanted to mention is there is still going to be tree service used anyway. There's certain trees that maybe are just, well, they're professional. You know, those tree services are pretty professional, and there's a lot of them in the area. People know how expensive they are as well. But there's some trees that we still wouldn't feel safe taking down ourselves. It's just with, you know, the stuff coming on with all the ash, the condition of it, it would just give us one more chance to maybe there's a few more we could do ourselves. We've also had a few calls with our health and safety committees that staff members have brought up that, you know, our signs are just kind of like, you know, stop signs, etc. They're just tall enough that you know, you might have to stand in the back of a truck. You're not really supposed to do that. A bucket truck would be safer. Now it doesn't mean we're outside Ministry of Labor requirements, but it came out of that as well. But it just would make a job easier to cut a tree down, say, for example, right? With a bucket truck. So I'm not sure if I mean, I don't know the exact number we spent last year or not. But there's still going to be some expenses there. It's not like the bucket truck is going to make all tree service fees go away. Is that 50 this year? That was 15.
Okay, who, Shirley, is that good? Councillor Eccles.
Thank you. And I guess this goes back maybe to Kevin. You mentioned that the upstaffing for 2024, we're only going to be at that at July. So it's only half. Did I hear that right? That would be in the 2024 budget?
Yeah, when we budget up staffs, typically we budget them halfway through the year. What that does is we fund that from the levy. We build the entire price, the cost of that up staff for the year into it. And the next year, the 50-50 funding kicks in for the whole year. So that's the reason why instead of facing the 100% of the cost in the first year, we build it into the budget, but we really started halfway through the year.
Okay. Yep.
So our 100% of the 50% is in there. And then it doesn't change for 2025. Because I've seen that happen in other organizations where, yeah, we're hiring somebody. Yeah, but it's only going to cost us this much because it's halfway through the year, 3/4 of the way before we get the person. But then it's the next year. Oh, by the way, now we're in for 100% of that staff funding. So we've got that 100% of our commitment going forward is in the 24 budget. So it's not going to be double when we hit 25. That's where I'm going with that question.
Yes, that's correct. Our portion for say 2024 is built into the levy. Like that is built in and everything going forward. The ministry, they're always 1 year behind. And this just prevents a significant increase. We used to get an inflationary increase in 2019. We didn't get that anymore. But again, this practice is not just here, it's pretty much across Ontario. You'll see most of our enhancements start halfway through the year.
So I think you're, very optimistic in that one statement that the ministry is only a year behind. Found in but maybe that's just the ministry here that you're dealing with. A lot of the ministries are a lot further than a year behind. Is that recorded?
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. I'm not sure, Kim, if this is for you or for Pat, but in the transportation details, so this is under the reduction in the travel and training. In the transportation details, there was an increase of 17,000 and 9,000 for travel for certified engineering staff who require formal annual training to maintain their certifications. Is that still in there? And this reduction is from other areas? I guess I just want to make sure that our certified professional engineering staff are going to be able to maintain their training.
So thank you, and through you, Mr. Warden, the budget is created on the basis that these reductions aren't included. Okay, the budget is before these reductions. So the 26,000 is in the budget right now. We're proposing to reduce that by $13,000. And so I don't know, Pat, if you feel comfortable. As I say, we're trying to account for a return to some in-person learning. We've also, had some personnel changes in transportation due to the implementation of the strategic plan, et cetera. But I think, Pat, you know better your individual requirements of your staff.
Yeah, we still, when I look back to when I started, there was a lot of course, like there was not many courses for people to take, or, we could send one guy a year kind of thing. We've kind of really ramped that up to where, there's a lot of training available for people, and it's really benefited our group, obviously. But then now we have a few younger guys, we have a lot of training. It maybe is one of those things that we're still getting an increase. We're going with as much online training as we can get. But again, maybe there's some courses, there's an asphalt course, for example, that's 2 weeks long. that over the years people have taken, probably excessive for what we need. So there's a few things in there that maybe are just a matter of just pausing our training and maybe instead of 2 courses in 1 year, you take 1. Some of our younger guys, you know what I mean? So it's still, like I said, still an increase. We're gonna train all the guys we can, maybe prioritize them a little better. And we're gonna try to save as much as we can as far as doing online training. So it's a cut that we felt that we could live with.
So our engineering staff that require certifications will still be able to receive the training necessary to keep those certifications. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Maybe, oh, Councillor Eccles, go ahead.
Thank you. The Buckthorn project. So we're deciding that, you know, we can do that kind of from a reserve, and that the project that we're doing, the 70,000, will clear that up, and we won't be seeing that in the budget going forward. It's not a problem like Wild Chervil is. It's continuous.
I think that this is if I'm correct, this is the first year or the second year of a project that was meant to really get at some kind of hot spots in that regard. I personally am advocating for goals, but I will leave it to Scott to make a comment about the future.
Thanks. Through you, Mr. Warden, I'm not sure we've done the costing on goats just yet. But Grace Auble staff is offering other services, and I think where you're going is this is going to need to be a multi-year project. And so the general intent is when we do a harvest and we do multiple harvests each year, you'd go in afterwards and treat for the buckthorn such that when you have that clearer canopy, it doesn't start to grow up. And Kim is right. This is the first year we've done it, and we have a report from Grace Auble to say it was more successful than they thought. But in order to continue the abatement of buckthorn, it needs to be a multi-year project, and so we don't even have a time frame on that to say, you know, in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years it's good. It's going to need to be a year over year if we are to make a dent in this. We have proposed funding it from reserve just to try to lessen the hit this year, so to speak. But if council's supportive, it's something that staff would be recommending going forward with on an ongoing basis, at least for the immediate future. I'm not sure if that answers your question or
not. Yeah, it kind of answers the question, but it just, you know, again, what are we putting off today that's going to be a bigger problem tomorrow? Going through it. But even a bigger thing than that, Grey County has under its control 0.2% of the forested area in Grey County. I don't know, you know, what is it that much? And we're kind of control the buckthorn in our, so are we saying that it's the only problem is in Grey County forests? Or is it in Saugeen Valley and Grace Auble and Nottawasaga control forests and a lot of private land out there as well too? I guess it's honorable that we're trying to do something, but we're doing a little bit. It's like somebody says about raising the water of Lake Huron. That we just into the wind here on this one. I mean, the control that we have, and I think that's where I'm going back to the Wild Chervil. We can control a little bit on ours, but exponentially what we do is not having an effect on the overall control province wide. Again, is it something we're into that we're not getting a return on the investment here?
It's a fair point, and thank you for raising that, Councillor Eccles. I think our strategy is twofold. One is to maintain the health of our own county forests, and particularly if we are looking to continue to offer those as both recreational opportunities and generating some revenue. Granted, they're not money makers, so to speak, generating some revenue going forward. Gray Sauble staff, through their professional forestry expertise, felt this was necessary to preserve that. And the other piece here is hopefully learning from what Grey County is doing to be able to share with others, including our conservation authorities and our private woodlot owners. We had a presentation 3 or 4 years ago on this with a company that was pitching sort of a leading edge chemical at the time that sounded interesting. It was still in trials. It was prohibitively expensive. And at that time, as staff, we just thought, well, there's no way we could look to go forward with this. This is just wildly expensive, and we couldn't, in good conscience, recommend it to council. Now that those costs have come down slightly, we're interested in continuing to pursue this, both for our own benefit, but also the benefit it could provide to private landowners and conservation authorities that are struggling with the same issue. And if we could, show a proof of concept on what we've done, it may benefit others too.
So let the minutes show that Councillor Eccles wants to raise the budget $5 million to deal with buckthorn across the county. Councillor DeBreen.
Good morning, Warden, and good morning, County Council. Just to piggyback on that, the recommendation before us right now are the highlighted items that should our review throughout the day discover other savings, because we still need to discuss those other, lunches or training or banquets. If we find savings there, we can put things back in. Or once we pass this resolution to adopt the recommended reductions, then would we need a resolution to reconsider, or can we trade off?
I think the intent here is that these are reductions that staff have identified. As the day progresses, if council finds or wishes more reductions or additions, then absolutely, that's what we're here for. Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
Quite all right. But if we find savings elsewhere and we feel that the program is important enough to continue, whether it's buckthorn or if it's some other program, we can revisit. Thank you. Yes, that's correct.
Councillor Matrosovs.
Thank you. Through you, the warden, I would just like to follow up on what my colleagues have just been asking about here as well. There was reference in the response that the buckthorn, one of the most advantageous times to go in is after there's been a harvest. Now, we must have some sort of data coming our way in terms of when the next harvest will be in our forests, because the return on investment of eradicating the buckthorn and the way in which it creates that poison under the soil that will actually prevent new natural assets from being grown properly in those forests will have a negative effect on what could be considered a positive natural asset in another category. So there has to be sustainable thinking on it, but in our budget considerations for right now, in this 70,000 and hearing the recommendation that's actually coming from staff on this one, how does that align with the efficiency of going in after a harvest? Like I'm not sure now, no longer serving on Gray Sauble, I'm not sure when the next harvest cycle is going to be, the next plot, because although we live and breathe with wild chervil in the Blue Mountains and it's so frustrating to put money and effort and time into eradicating something on our side of the fence when there are ongoing issues on another side of the fence. We can't just be passive and just ignore the buckthorn, because it has such a negative effect towards new growth and new natural asset. So what do we know about the actual data of the harvesting would be the question. Thank you.
Who wants to? Scott, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, through you to Councillor Mattress. Thank you for that question. I've just pulled up the report here that Grace Obel has sent for this year. To answer your question on a general level, we have harvests every year. We mark a year in advance to figure out what portion of the woodlot is safe for harvest in accordance with our forestry practices in that regard. And then we tender and private companies bid on those and then cut sort of a year later, so to speak. So we're always working ahead in that harvest program in accordance with our forest management plan. My understanding, and this is where I'm getting a little beyond my expertise, is they go in after a harvest, they cut the buckthorn shoots, and then they treat the stems with that chemical to prevent them from regrowing up. So I don't believe it's a broad application of a chemical in that regard. It's treating the shoots or the stems, so to speak. With respect to what they've done this year they were able to treat 169 hectares, which is actually more than they anticipated being able to treat with the 2023 budget. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but if not, I'm happy to look into it further with our partners at Grace Obel.
Okay, Andrew. Good. Councillor Greg, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to make sure we're clear here that 6 weeks ago, there was $70,000 proposed for buckthorn treatment in the budget, and it was coming from municipal levy. We're still doing the work. This recommendation is just funding it from reserve and not from the municipal levy. So the work's getting done.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Perhaps, Kim, do you want to speak to the last portion of your report there, please?
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, Council. So the second part of this report was with regard to the establishment of a Budget and Finance Committee. So in preparation for the implementation of multi-year operating, which I think will be a real benefit to helping us in our deliberations in the future, staff recommend the creation of a Budget and Finance Committee and that a terms of reference for that be brought back for consideration. So we intend to bring that forward to you on December the 14th. Certainly we've heard this morning and many other times that, your desire to have more time with financial matters outside of the budget deliberations specifically. And a Budget and Finance Committee could work with staff throughout the year to review financial reports, make recommendation around the development of budgets and the schedule of how we'll deliberate on those financial policies, and then things like asset management policies and service levels that kind of underpin the funding decisions or the spending decisions that we're making. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that, but as is our regular practice, we'll bring forward that terms of reference in the staff report on December 14th. But then once the committee itself, with your support, is struck, then there'll be another chance to look at the terms of reference at the beginning of that committee's work.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Any questions on that piece of the report? Okay, not seeing any. I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Kim. So the next piece of the budget is, or the meeting rather, is the budget overview and department presentations. And I see transportation have really loaded up the bench out there. So I'm wondering, do we want to take a stretch right now so that everybody's fresh to take a run at transportation, or do we want to keep going? Mary Lou, what are you just giving an introduction to transportation, or how are we approaching this?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I have a few minutes just talking about the budget, where to find things, your handouts, and then we'll do the intro to turn it over to Pat and his team.
Let's do that. We'll sort of preface where we're going to head, and then we'll take a break after that. Okay.
Okay, so the path to today, it's been a long one. So we've changed things up a bit. We're starting in reverse order. So today, the first department up is transportation, and we'll get through human services today, we anticipate. And then for next Friday's meeting, we'll talk about the starting point after all the discussions that have been had today. And look at planning, community development, corporate services, talk about reserves and the next steps. So you have a number of handouts that have been provided to you. So the first one is the 2024 budget detailed package. So that is a reduced version of what's on posted in the meeting. So it provides copies of all the spreadsheets, the narratives. So I'd call that the Coles Notes version for the people that actually know what Coles Notes was. The next one is there's also the spreadsheets and a little book on the 10-year capital forecast with the focus really for today based on 2024, and departments will be talking about what's in their 2024 budget for capital, as well as any significant work in the next year or so, or any significant changes. The last document that we prepared is this small spreadsheet. And it's the one that you've been working on for the past 2 meetings. We've added a column in the middle, so you'll see starting on page 2, there's a number of X's. X is a reference to these are items that were contained in Kim's report that you've just discussed. The numbers might be slightly different. We might have proposed more, or we might have proposed less. And then there is an asterisk for an item that refers to long-term care dealt with at their committee of management, and that has been removed from the budget that you're seeing today. So this is just to give you an idea of what was in Kim's report versus what was on the list that we've been chipping away at. And of course, there are things that were recommended in Kim's report that were not on this list. So to a finance person, those 2 things will not balance. When we go to move through the budget, I will say it's very helpful if you've opened the budget from the county website and have opened it as an HTML. That gives the same page numbers as in whether it's your abbreviated package. So it's helpful when we're talking about specific questions. If somebody has went into one of the actual financial pages in the detailed budget document and wanted to talk about transportation and their equipment, it's easier if we're all working on the same pages. So if you've made questions in preparation for today's meeting and that's not how you did it, what I'm going to ask is if you happen to jot down and you know like the page you were referring to. So if it's transportation, machinery, and equipment, at least we know the right page that we can reference in the overall budget document. That's very helpful for us. So then moving to, I don't know, am I controlling the slides or? Okay, you can move to the next one. Thank you. So the paths to today. So you can see on October 24th, when we first talked, we were at 9.9 million, which was a 12.12 increase. There were a number of reductions made in the meetings we had with Committee of the Whole on November 3rd and 9th, and then Long-Term Care Committee of Management on November 14th. That resulted in reductions of just over 1.7 million. We've got the estimated growth. The final return roll is mid next week. We don't expect anything significant in a change. There's a difference in the ratios with Owen Sound because they set their own tax policy. So today, based on the budget that was published, we were sitting at a $6.6 million increase, which was a 9.58%. I'll get you to flip the slide, Sarah. So the next slide shows the breakdown of what we call the functions, and still a reference to what we used to call the old standing committees. And then we'll go to the next slide. So when it was at the 9.58% increase, an average taxpayer with a single home not on water, with an assessed value of $289,000 would have seen $105.07 increase. Then we go to the next one. And so this includes the 1.6 million that Kim went through in her report just a few minutes ago. That is not in the budget that's before you. And then we flip to the next slide. That reduces the increase to 7.23%. And that same house that was assessed at $289,000 would have a $79.30 increase. And we flip to the next. And I'm going to let Sue go through those slides.
You and through you, Mr. Ward, good morning. This gives you a snapshot of our total gross expenditures across our sort of functional areas that we use. And it just gives you a real kind of picture of where the dollars are being spent. So you can see that like 30% of the dollars we spend are in our long-term care area, 24% on transportation. We have 15% on Ontario Works and Childcare, 10% on paramedic services, housing and corporate services sit around 8%, planning and community development are 4%, and 1% is on healthcare and educational funding. If you could flip to the next slide, please, Tara. And this is those expenses, that 204 million or 270 million, I should say, split. And it shows you sort of the 4 years of expenditures. And you will notice that there is a significant increase in between 2023 and 2024. And the large value sits there within their human services bracket. Those increases of expenses can be found mainly in our larger capital, such as in social services, there's early on, which is about 1.2 million. Paramedic services is about 4 million, just under 4. And of course, the Rockwood redevelopment expenses are in there. So that's why you see that large spike in human services expenditures for the year. And the next slide sort of slices this not by functional, but type of expenditures you'll see. So you'll see at the top, the gray one is 2023's and the burgundy is 2024's expenditures. So you will see that our purchase services or contracted services appear to have increased significantly over the last year, which the main reason that is because of exactly what I explained before, is that it's in those large capital projects. And it's actually, the bulk of that is sitting in our capital fund, not our operating fund for those types of purchases. And our salaries and benefits, they take up a good chunk of our expenses as well. So you'll see on the next slide that so 37% of our expenditures are spent in purchased or contracted services, and 32% is in salaries and benefits. And the bulk of those are mainly due to our COLA increases every year, collective agreement changes, the non-union compensation review, annualized positions, and of course our benefit costs as well are enveloped in those costs. And interestingly enough, I looked yesterday and our benefit cost as a percentage of salaries has stayed relatively stable from the prior year. So this year, our percentage of salaries or benefits to salaries is 28.27. Of our every dollar spent, we spend about 28.27 on benefits. And last year it was 28.11. And the bulk of those can be seen between our OMERS and just group benefits. So 30% of our benefit costs are with OMERS, which is our pension plan, which is your local tiers will be familiar with. 30% is group benefits, and then, or 33 is group benefits, and then the rest is mainly our statutory other benefits that we have, such as CPP, EI, WSIB, and EHT. Some which are our percentage of salaries and some are more flat fees. So as our salaries go up, our benefits will go up as well. And I believe that's all we were going to show you today before we go off and possibly have a break. And we'll switch over to Pat and he can talk about transportation.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you, Mary Lou. Let's recess we'll come back at 11:15 and we'll have a run at transportation. 1 minute warning. Okay, it's 11:15. We'll bring the meeting back to order. Mary Lou, if you'd like to introduce, oh, wait. Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden, and I really hate to get off of our schedule, but we do have a couple of individuals that are sitting with us today that are interested in one specific portion of the budget, and that it was the potential removal of the funding to the Gray Ag Services. So with leave of council, I would like to answer that question for them, and I would put forth a motion that council supports the continued funding for Gray Ag Services for the 2024 budget. If I have leave of council to answer that question right now, so that those gentlemen, there's a lot of angst within the agricultural community, and certainly sitting on both Gray County's Ag Advisory Committee and Gray Saubles. I certainly understand the value that Gray Ag Services brings to the county and to our agricultural community. So I'd like to deal with that if we could.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Does anyone object to that? Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor McQueen? Any discussion? Councillor Gregg?
Could you just provide the page numbers so we can quickly reference, or?
It's actually on the short list of potential reductions. It is on the 1 to 3rd page of those reductions near the bottom under planning, and it is titled Remove Funding for Gray Ag Services. It is an amount of 69,100. Councillor Gregg?
So my question is, better put then, if we had the proper page number, just to provide context in terms of the funding that's been granted for the last 2 years, probably a little bit better than just the one pager.
Mary Lou will find it for us here. Councillor DeBreen?
Thank you. And I agree with Councillor Gregg. I believe it was 63,200. And so my question would be to clarify, were we proposing an additional 69,100, or are we just proposing the difference? If we held it at the 2023 level, what number would that be?
As I'm reading the sheets, the 2023 budget allocated 63,200, and that included space at Great Gables. The proposed amount for 2024 was 69,100. So I'm still, Mary Lou's, a number of staff are looking for those numbers. Councillor Matrosovs.
Thank you. Through you, the warden, a point of personal privilege. Could I either see the motion on the screen or hear it verbally repeated? Thank you.
Yep, we can do that. Oh, Tara's going to read it for us.
So the motion on the floor is that County Council supports the continued funding of Gray Ag Services for the 2024 budget.
Thank you. So through the warden, if it's on the floor for discussion, then the question is the intent of that motion then to take into consideration the 2024 number then and the slight increase? I just want to confirm that it's moving with the budget increase.
I'll go to Councillor Mackey, the mover of the motion for that.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Yes, the intent was the number that was printed, the 69,100, that we support that in the 2024 budget.
Okay. Mary Lou has, Councillor Eccles.
Well, if that's the case, then the motion says for Gray Ag Services. My understanding that's 69,100, so the motion should, it could put forward a amendment to the motion, not just to Gray Ag Services, but to our agricultural funding for 2024. I think I haven't got it here on the screen, and I haven't got enough of a mirror to see what the motion is up there. Is it Gray Ag Services, which is included in that 69, or is it the full 69, which includes 4-H donations, da, 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 da?
My understanding, Mary Lou, perhaps you could clarify that.
The amount for 4-H was shown separately. So if we're looking on page 94 of the budget document, line 67,007, which is interfunctional rent of 27,600. So that's the amount that is charged to the agriculture budget for the space that is used at Grey Gables. And then the remainder for Gray Ag is sitting in account 66,000, which is payments to individuals and organizations. And it's not that full amount. That's a part of it. So those two make up the amount for Gray Ag. And then the amount for 4-H is listed separately, and that's $4,000 off the top of my head.
Councillor DeBreen.
I'm afraid we're not following along. We don't see it, page 94, and oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think you're going to introduce something simple and away we go. So, but good questions. Mary Lou, can you help us?
Sure. When you're in the detailed budget document and you go to page 94, it says agriculture operating at the top of the page. No, it's on your computer. It's in one of the detailed documents that looks like a financial report. Okay, so it's on the screen now. So account 67,007 interfunctional rent of 27,600 is the amount that is charged to the agriculture budget for the space that Gray Ag occupies at Grey Gables. The remainder of the amount for Gray Ag is in account 66,000 payments to individuals and organizations. That account is 42,500, and that's not all to Gray Ag. So if you add up the interfunctional amount and look at the difference between that and what's listed for Gray Ag, that's the amount. Okay, and then the $4,000 for 4-H is separate. It's not in that amount for Gray Ag Services.
Okay, Councillor Eccles. So the gist of the motion, as I understand it, is to fund Gray Ag Services to the extent it is proposed in the 2024 budget. Is 69,100. Yes, Councillor Gregg.
Thank you. And through you, Warden, I'd like to move an amendment to freeze the funding at the level of 2023 budget allocation.
Which would be the 63.2. Okay, so the amendment has Mary Lou. All right, Mary Lou, go ahead.
Okay, so just to be clear, then what you're doing is impacting the Grey Gables budget by $2,000. And so those increases cover the cost of utilities, et cetera. So that the net to the county of that interfunctional budget is zero. It's an expense to this one. It's a revenue and offset. It's a negative expense to Grey Gables. So that portion doesn't change the bottom line at all.
So you still wish to proceed with the amendment? No. Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll try to avoid doing that again. But thank you for obliging that request. So, Mary Lou, if you would proceed now with the transportation introduction, we'll carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So I'm looking at this summary document that we've prepared, so that the Coles Notes version. And if you go to page, so it's right near the back. And look at page 249. That's where the narrative called Transportation Services Details begins. So the Transportation Services departmental budgets for 2024 includes a net departmental requirement, which is a total of the operating and capital of $24,573,400 as compared to $22,313,300 in 2023. So that's an increase of $2,260,100 or 10.13%. So there's a note here that this budget has been assisted by $8.5 million from development charges and includes just over $1 million investment in asset management. And just to remind you, there are things that are written in this narrative that you have removed by virtue of supporting Kim's report. So the skid steer, the bucket truck, etc. Now I'll turn it over to Pat.
All right, thank you, Mary Lou. So you don't have to put anything on the floor or anything, I'm just ready to go. All right, okay. So I was just gonna give just a quick kind of outline here of some things that we do, just that all went into this budget. Just a little quick summary of some budget challenges. And then I was gonna start through the write-up. So the first thing I just want to mention is what transportation does. So with our 870 kilometers of road, we're in 3 divisions, maintenance, engineering, and admin. Maintenance is basically upholding the minimum maintenance standards that are required by Ontario. So all our plowing, summer maintenance, then we have our tree crew, bridge crew, signs, weed spraying, those types of things. So that's our maintenance staff. Engineering, of course, does all our design and construction as well. Construction tenders. Our maintenance staff does construction as well, smaller jobs. We do a lot of culverts ourselves, ditching ourselves. Putting out tenders, looking at speed limits, traffic calming, comments on development, and that kind of stuff is what engineering does. Now, the one thing I did want to mention is we do a lot of our own design jobs on our rural projects. A lot of the urban ones that are done with the member municipalities, we still hire consultants on those. And there's some complicated bridge designs, we would still hire a consultant, for example. Those contracts that we deem, relatively simple, which sometimes are really not simple at all, actually. We try to do those ourselves with our engineering team. We have everyone that works for us in the engineering department used to work for a consultant. So we kind of feel we have our own consulting team, but there is still consultants who make a lot less money, I guess, than real consultants. But we still deal with consultants on certain projects. And then the admin group does our permits, oversized permits. They deal with payroll, which is always seems more complicated than it needs to be. Filing, billing, collecting for permit fees, and then billing out for fees. We've been working quite a bit and we've accomplished a lot on going online with our oversized permits and that type of thing. It's saving us a bit of work. It seems to be saving our kind of our people that get a lot of permits, like Royal Homes or those types of people. It seems to be saving them a lot of work. This Transnomus for permits, you don't have to go to every municipality and get an oversized permit anymore. You can put your route in, and then all of us will issue one permit. So it's been quite good. Next, I just wanted to talk about, and it's kind of a rehash of what Sue said, just about some of the costs that you'll see. And I just thought I'd mention it generally than going over each individual item here. It's just our activities always come down to that labor, equipment, and material. And you'll see a lot of the kind of standard rates to keep raising here. Labor, of course, always seems to be going up, whether it's just the minimum raise or the negotiated raise for union staff, the non-union review. OMERS is always up a bit, right? CPP's up, EI's up. So that just, all those costs go through every activity. So, you know, you see a winter maintenance activity goes up, well, labor went up. For every worker we have, the labor cost went up. Equipment is the same. Everybody's seen lately, they all know, you know, you're trying to buy a vehicle, it's suddenly gone crazy. Any piece of equipment is more than it used to be. Anything from a chainsaw, you know, to a ratchet is more than it used to be. So all that stuff gets kind of brought back in. And with our equipment, for example, if equipment's more, our charge out rates go up. We charge ourselves our use of equipment. As the charge out rates go up, then the cost of snow plowing goes up. So that kind of goes right through. Materials the same. So materials kind of the third one. Everything with material is going up as well, from granular to a metal post, salt and sand. You'll see it's a big one in here because this is the end of our salt tender that we've had for a long time. We think it's going to go up this year. Fuel, of course, is up and down, usually up. And it kind of goes back through every activity we do too. So I just wanted to say you'll see those throughout every little raise. It just, and our activities comes from that labor, equipment, and material costing more. So I'm going to start the right up here, and I just wanted to, hopefully not too much. You'll see me looking back here at our guys. I want Trevor, Jim, and Sean are here from our department, and then I want to thank Matt and Calvin from finance for helping us so much. Finance started scheduling meetings with us at the beginning of the summer. So we met really regularly to kind of try to get behind this thing, just to get to the bottom of our budget and make it make sense for everybody. And we spent a lot of time looking at it. So they've worked quite hard. Hopefully I don't have to look back too much. And the honor of going first, I guess I just wanted to say, I will not be offended if you want to save your questions for other departments. And maybe the cuts too. You could say there's lots of departments behind me to cut things other than mine. So, because I've never got to go first before. So I'll start on the right up on page 249 here. That's up on the board. So as Mary Lou said, that 10.13 that's shown there, there is still some cuts through here that are not reflected in that number. And an important thing to know that $1,066,000 from asset management. So that's 4.78% of that number. So that was that I guess underfunding of all our capital assets from the asset management plan. So that's that 1.57% corporate, works out to almost 5% of our increase. Is just putting money away for all those capital projects because they're underfunded. And I don't think it's gotten any better since the asset management plan in 21, because stuff has really gone up in price since then. And our typical thing of, you know, 1.57, and then we have a 2% inflation rate. It probably doesn't keep up with what construction inflation rate really is. I remember the earlier slide that Mary Lou had was showing, you know, fuel's up by 30% and the asphalt cement is up by 30%. So we're probably falling behind in how much we're putting into our assets on an ongoing basis. So the first kind of item is our ordinary maintenance budget. And like I said, a lot of that is just labor. So that's our road top maintenance right away. That's kind of our summer maintenance, traffic signals, supervision. So we had those 3 full-time operator positions that we added that are full year salary now. So last year we did a few things, like we took those routes back from Sutherland that we're doing ourselves. So we have extra equipment for that route. It seems to, it's nice to have it back internal again. And then we had some seasonal guys that went full-time because we just find really a full-time guy doesn't cost any more than a seasonal guy that's working 51 weeks anyway. And we added a full-time position to the bridge crew. And the bridge crew worked out quite well this summer. So that's kind of where that increase comes from. So I don't know for questions, if you want me to just keep going, and you can just interrupt as be. Yeah. Okay. Okay. The next item on page 249 there is that winter. sorry. So that is our ongoing winter maintenance. Last year when we took those routes back, we funded a bunch of it out of reserve. Now it's a full internal cost. So, and I mentioned there sand and salt. So we'll see. We're working on the tender right now to go out sometime early in the year to see what we get our sand and salt for. The next thing is the supervision overhead administrative budget. So an increase there. We have another technologist that we in 23 that started halfway through the year for a person that had left. And then the increase in travel and training. Yeah. So as we had talked about earlier, we are working with OJRA trying to cut down on our travel and training. Like we've really noticed a big difference even with some of our area foreman meetings. We used to meet in person. Now I think it's just, once a month they'll meet in person. The rest of the time we'll be remote. So we're always looking to save on some of our travel and our training. Same type of thing. Our administration does a good job of trying to figure out how to best offer a course. Is it better sending 3 people away or having someone come here, maybe work through AORs, the road supers, and maybe have the municipalities do the training all together. So we had
Pat, I got a question here. Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Just before you got too far, Pat, just in regards to minimum maintenance standards, do we well exceed the minimum maintenance standards, or is there any opportunity to look at minimum maintenance standards in our overall operations? Like I know whenever there's a winter storm event now, we put out our warning, but just in general, are we well exceeding what is required?
I wouldn't say we're well exceeding, we're generally always satisfying. I think we are probably just from, even personal experience from driving, we used to have a lot of bare and wet roads. A lot of times now, like it happened just a week ago, we drive in and you're center bare, say, and you're letting the salt work. We're not going out sometimes for that second pass as much. We track salt, to make sure we're not overusing it. So we do exceed just because some routes include, different levels of service on different roads. Every route isn't just a level 3 service, for example. So, but I don't know if Jim Nicol wants to mention that or if that. Again, it's the whole Price is Right thing. You can't be under, opposite of Price is Right, I guess. You cannot be under, but you don't want to be too far over, right? So I think we do a good job of trying to do what needs to be done and not get excessive. Okay, so on to the I guess the facilities, depots, and domes. So there's a couple things in here that are a little could use an explanation, I guess. I didn't want to say goofy. I was going to say goofy, but I didn't think that was good. One is the coverall building in Clarksburg. You'll see it here for 150,000. So Kimberly, the dome in Kimberly is nearing the end of its life. We've looked at it a bunch of times. We've had some very minor repairs done, but we don't know how long it's going to last. We generally don't use the material there very much, but Blue Mountains does. So we were thinking, well, we put a new cover on it, Blue Mountains, but they really don't, they would prefer to use the one in Clarksburg. The one in Clarksburg isn't big enough. So there's no point in building another one in Kimberly, for example. We're better off we've just put 150,000 in there. If something happens with the dome in Kimberly, we're going to need material somewhere that we're kind of just investigating now, sort of a coverall that could someday be moved, on those blocks, that type of thing. Because the dome in Clarksburg is not that old, and Blue Mountains has some plans to, potential new depot site. So we're just trying to work together, but we just kind of put that in there to cover ourselves in case something happens. We don't want to be left short. And we have more extreme plans. You could go store it in another facility we have and truck it for the winter if something happened. So we just didn't want to get caught that we'd have to come back to this committee in case something happened in the winter to Kimberly.
Pat, before you go any further, sorry, I apologize. I'm gonna keep doing that to you. So Counselor Eccles.
So we're building $150,000 dome. What's the contribution from the town of the Blue Mountains in this project? It sounds like they use the dome more than we do, the county.
So the existing one in Kimberley, is it 70? Or what's the finance?
Jim, maybe come on up to the microphone, Jim. Sorry. We got a couple people online that aren't able to.
I'm just trying to remember the existing dome is already split with us and Blue Mountain in
Yeah.
Clarksburg.
37 to 30, the dome at Clarksburg's 37%. Town of Blue Mountains and it's 63. Is that up to 100?
So yeah, but the one thing we haven't spent a lot of time talking with Blue Mountains about what exactly happens if Kimberly's not available, other than we know that they would prefer not to go down there to get material if they could.
And we had the dome again, minor repairs done on the dome at Kimberly this year. And we're hopefully can get through this winter with it, but it's hard to say. It may be rep this year and then Town of the Mountains will be, and us will be fighting for sand at Clarksburg because it's only 6,000 tons. And we use, between the two of us, we use about 8,000. I think Town of Blue Mountains usually gets around 2,000 tons from Kimberly. And we usually empty the dome at Clarksburg. So we hate to see anybody short, and this was a stopgap. As Pat mentioned, the dome at Clarksburg had repairs done to it. So it's probably good for another 6 or 7 years, and then we'll have to replace it. And with that, and again, the Patrol D, it's in the mix too as well. So there's lots of, balls in the air, so. Does that answer the question? Yeah. No.
So it answers the volumes that are there. And the reason that Blue Mountains is driving down into Grey Highlands to get their product. And it answers that there's 66% is Grey Counties, 37 or 33% is Blue Mountains. Is there a funding thing here coming from the blue? And I see my colleague Greg to it. Why? Like, are we going to start doing all of the Blue Mountain roads or all of the roads in West Grey? It just amazes me that we're building something that Grey County doesn't. It's for the town of the Blue. We're resolving that issue. I think you understand where I'm coming from, Andrew.
Yeah.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, that's a discussion we have to have with Blue Mountains a little more. They weren't necessarily aware of the condition of Kimberly, for example, or what our plans were. So yeah, we haven't agreed on anything in there yet, but yes, I know what you're saying. There's a benefit there for all parties really, but it's not 100% benefit to us. We should have that discussion.
Okay, Councillor Eccles, go ahead.
So it's a 2,000 tone in the Kimberly dome that may be under duress or stress if the dome goes down. What about putting in, as MTO does and a lot of other municipalities do, you can have storage outside and put a tarp over it. Do we need to build a dome to do this? Is there other venues to store that excess material that may be required?
Or other building on.
Yeah, this is it is fairly early days in us looking into what the solutions are. We have a facility in Egremont. Could be possibly cheaper to truck it from Egremont. or outside facilities, like I said. I mean, once it freezes, you're in a bad way there, but, so it is in the budget. We're not imminently building it, but we just felt like it should be there just for some, response.
Thank you, Pat, for that. Councillor Eccles, are you? Nope. Okay, go ahead. So at this point in time, it's really not something that should be in the 2024 budget. Do we take it out until we've got everything there and ready to build? Sounds like Kimberly probably would get us through the 2024 season and put it into the 2025 budget.
Yeah, and that to me, I mean, if that's what this committee sees, I get it. Like, it's a big enough job. It's just, I guess it's response time is the worst part about waiting to have to come back to committee in case but maybe committee wants to know exactly what we're doing anyway. So it's neither here nor there to us.
Like we also could use the Normanby yard and haul from Legermont and haul from there if it came to it. We get a overstock in at that yard and then haul for the short period of time that we would need it. Before the half loads go on anyway. So, just one of those things that we're not sure how long the lifespan of the Kimberly yard is.
Okay, oh, sorry, Jim. I have Randy at the back there wants to chime in here. Randy?
Yeah, I think that option would be available, like Pat said and Jim said, that if council want to explore that. I think staff were trying to put in place options should the Kimberly Dome fail. As Jim indicated, we think it will last the 2024 season, but it may not. The options that Pat and his team have put together are something that would be a mobile option, so that way you could construct a coverall building that could be reused and repurposed somewhere else. So we wouldn't be losing out on that money, so to speak. We could reuse it at another location. So, and then if it, down the road, if we don't need that structure anymore, then that could be also resold and looked at in terms of the other pieces that I think Jim was alluding to earlier, in terms of there's a lot of pieces in play in terms of Patrol D and other things that lead to what we need long-term in order to deal with our winter maintenance program. So this was an option that staff put in as a kind of a fail safe, but there is some risk if it's removed. But it sounds like the risk could be managed.
One thing, I guess we might have had this discussion earlier with you, so I do apologize. There are many things in the budget that are funded from reserve. So if you pull them out, they're not going to make a difference to the bottom line of the levy. So we really have, there's two kind of questions going on here. One is the nature of the work and whether council is supportive of having the work done. And the other piece is whether or not it's going to make a difference to the bottom line in 2024. This is a levy funded, or this is a reserve funded item. So council can direct Pat and his staff as they so choose, but it will not impact the bottom line of the budget. Thanks.
But as we know with reserves, and in this budget, there is a number in there that's going back into reserve. So for every 150,000 you pull out, there may be 100,000 or there may be 200,000 that's going back into that transportation reserve capital. And that comes from levy. So say that it's not going to make an effect, Madam CEO, yes, it will make an effect. So I'm going to put forward a motion that it be dropped by $100,000. The levy portion of it, whether you want to say it's going into reserve or whether this not be funded but it'd be dropped by $100,000. That leaves $50,000 if there is an emergency and it takes extra trucking to get it there until you get the whole thing settled out and be put into the 2025 budget. So my motion is to drop this by $100,000. And that's the levy portion, whether it is into reserve or whether it's from this portion. I'll let you figure it out, but it is 100,000 towards the tax levy that I'm saying comes out of this. Thank you.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor McKay? Discussion, Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Do you have some in your budget though, if there was a small tear or some damage done to it, that you can still repair it to get it through?
I mean, it's in a bad enough spot, we probably wouldn't repair Kimberly, for example. But as Randy said, there is a lot of dominoes kind of to fall based on Patrol D. You know, depending on where it is, because I was getting to it shortly here, we haven't found land yet, and we might have to, you know, go a more aggressive route to get some land. That impacts all the other routes. If it's farther west, maybe we need another route to come down out of Clarksburg. If it's, you know, if it's farther south, we might not need a truck in Dundalk, but if it's farther west, we might need a truck in Dundalk. So I get Councillor Eccles' point that there is a lot of moving parts. And we're not in too big a hurry to do too much until we figure this Patrol D thing out, because it's still hanging around out there.
Okay. Oh, Councillor Nielsen, you have a question. Go ahead, Dane.
Thank you, Warden. I'll wait to see what the outcome of this motion is, because if the motion carries, then my question is mute.
Sorry, you cut out there, Dane. We didn't get the first part of that. Sorry.
Sorry about that, Warden. I was just saying that my question isn't relevant if this motion passes. So I'll wait to see if this motion passes first.
Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? I'll call the question. All those in favor of the amendment? That carries. Okay, carry on, Pat, please.
Okay, the next, I hope we don't have a problem with the Markdale Dome decommissioning, because it went down, we took it down this week. So hopefully you're happy with it. I think with 25 was the budget price on it. That is worth mentioning. Like Kimberly, for example, is a tear if something happens. Markdale Dome, we didn't use, it was blocked off. It really is the point where you know, you couldn't leave a dome like Markdale because it's a safety hazard, basically. Like, it had started to fall in already. I think it took them about 10 minutes to take it down. It's going to take them 3 days to clean up the stuff, but it didn't take much. Probably a guy with a hammer could have made it fall, maybe, but anyway, it is already done that job, just so you know. So I think we 25, we had about 6 bids on it, so it was pretty competitive pricing, which was good. The other things on there, like I said, the Egremont, that parking lot, it's just getting to the point where there's not much asphalt left. It's a lot of washouts and that type of thing. And the roll-up door has had it. We do keep material there, and there's a backhoe there. And then again, Patrol D is just about trying to find that land. You know, there's a kind of a finite area we're looking, and there's very few landowners who seem to own quite a bit of the land. So who aren't in a big hurry to sell. So that's why that thing keeps kind of going on. And that being said, we are still in Flesherton at the MTO yard. We have been informed by MTO that our agreement to have a space for some trucks there is no longer with MTO. It will be with Miller's maintenance group. So that MTO has changed they've changed their story on that. We used to have to get an agreement with them. So hopefully the agreement to stay there will be easier with Miller. And then the electric vehicle chargers for this year is the next thing. All right, so on to the major road and bridge construction. As you can see, that number continues to increase with the price of assets. One thing I just want to mention here, that $1.6 million transfer to reserve to set aside funds for future structure and culvert rehab. So it's one of those things where when we were doing a bridge, we would have it in the budget. Whereas something like our fleet has a bunch of reserve schedules, and then you put money in, you take it out as you need it, and it increases or decreases depending on what's coming up. We really feel that we need to go that way with our structures, because from our data, and there was a lot of bridges built, in the 40s and 50s. We've tried to do the last bunch of years, 1 or possibly 2 structures a year. But again, you don't want to do a structure before it's due. If it's got 10 years left, you might as well, you're not going to go in there and place it 10 years early. But we're at the point where from our data, we're about 3 structures a year being replaced in the 2030s and almost 5 structures a year being replaced in the 2040s. So we're going to need money at that point. There's still a lot to straighten out as far as I can't imagine how to be enough contractors and or designers to do 5 structures a year. And I don't know how they did it back in the 50s and 60s, other than there was no probably in-water with window, and maybe there wasn't quite as much regulation then. Maybe it was simpler. And maybe the structures were simpler too, right? Like we all know these old bridges are pretty solid too. So that is that new reserve that we want to start, and it will grow for a few years. And I'm sure there'll be a question, why is that so big? But it's waiting for that wave of infrastructure, big structures that are coming. And there's really no way out of it. Like if you look at maybe there's a couple town line bridges you can get away with closing, but some of the major county bridges, there's not really an easy way around. Kind of crossing our fingers on the flying car. But other than that, we're going to need money in the future. There's a thing in there about OSIF, our 3 million from OSIF. And then there again, it's an outline of the 1.57 over 15 years for the asset management plan. So we find that like with a cut to that, and as it kind of compounds on itself, I guess the difference, if you just cut if a person leaves or you have a new service that you weren't doing, you're going to save some money. If you put off a road job for 1 year, it doesn't go away. Everything just kind of slides down the list, but you're going to have to do it eventually because it's still going to continue to deteriorate. So we've got a couple of things that we pushed off to 25. One is Grey Road 9 pulverize and pave. Just because 14 was deteriorating more quickly. Again, that is one reason we are doing multiple lifts of asphalt now. We started, I think, in 2016. Just gives a little more clear deterioration path. So we kind of have an idea when a road's going to kind of go. And the other thing is the structure on Glenelg Road 23 with West Grey. So we're planning on working with West Grey to put out an RFP to do a design for that. So it's our structure, but there's some road work there that should go along with the structure that we're going to work together. But we're just going to get started soon on the design phase. So we pushed it off. And the map is at the back of the package, I believe, the 10-year capital. Okay, on to
sorry, Pat, Councillor Gray.
Thanks, Warden. And one of my questions, one of 4 here relates to major projects. So my question, Pat, is I know being in Old Sound, we are undertaking hopefully the largest road reconstruction project that we've ever undertaken yet in Alpha Street next year. And I'm not certain where all the other lower municipalities are, but consolidation's not a good thing for competition in the construction industry, and there's not a lot of players. So I guess my question is, do you work with lower tiers and your team in terms of evaluating what big projects are all being undertaken or hopefully being undertaken, and trying not to somewhat pile on and perhaps worsen pricing as opposed to strategically looking at lesser years versus heavier years?
Yeah, Trevor works with the municipalities to get their capital plans that they work together with us. I don't know how much you do as far as knowing the timing of a job that's not related to a road at all. Do you want to?
Maybe Trevor, yeah, come on up to the microphone, Trevor, please.
Yeah, so a lot of the coordination we do is generally about county roads within the member municipalities, but we do specifically with some of the bigger ones, we do talk about those other projects that they have going on as well. So it really just depends on the nature of the conversation with each municipality, how far we go on to that. Some don't really get into those type of conversations and others do. So we just kind of, if there's jobs that are in close proximity, that's when I find most of the conversations start around that. And then whether, you know, we delay a year or they, just to kind of make it easier. It happens basically with each municipality, and yeah, again, we're always trying to just, if we've got two big projects, we don't want to completely cripple a community for a year. So it's trying to make it work in all stages in that sense. So.
Yeah, I guess my question wasn't necessarily just about creating inconvenience as much as trying to secure the most advantageous pricing in the marketplace, whether we're at the lower tier or at the upper tier, just so that we some years don't pile on and worsen perhaps tender results coming back for projects we're trying to all undertaken.
I would say maybe that's been an issue in construction forever. You know, 2008, there's $50 billion in government money, and the prices we pay were completely ridiculous, all of us, right? So I know what you mean, and we are aware of most general big jobs, just because they tell us. And occasionally, I mean, with Blue Mountains, like the 19 and 21 job, we've talked to them quite regularly about their Montera Road is going to go at some point. So we do work with them, but again, we only know what they'll tell us. So, but I don't think we don't necessarily know why a contractor bids what he bids. I don't think there'd be often we'd say, oh, Owen Sound's doing that job. Well, we're not going to do any jobs in Owen Sound then, other than for access. Because usually there is someone going to do it. But again, I guess that's a communication with the lower tiers that we work on to try to make sure we're not stepping on each other's toes.
Councillor Body.
Thank you, Warden. Just maybe taking it a step further, we go out and do X number of kilometers or feet of asphalt per year. Just about all of us do it. We're sort of competing, and we end up being the ones at the end because we don't do enough. Have we thought about putting together a bulk buy for Grey County that everybody puts in, and we get a better price and we get more done for the price?
We have done, maybe not quite to that extent. In the past, we had a job we did with Grey Highlands. They were paving the road in the close proximity. The biggest issue we always run into is we're starting to tender in January, whereas everybody else isn't, their budget's not passed yet. So there is that we don't really want to wait around. And maybe that's a selfish, we want to be first out and you guys can do whatever you want to do. So maybe we do. I don't really mean that, but we do want to get out there. We don't want to wait around, right? We want to get out there. We want to get started early. We want to get done early. So, but again, maybe it's just that increased as at the strat plan session, more interaction with us and your folks to work on some bigger projects together would probably benefit us all. Yeah, that's the real answer.
Councillor Mattress.
Thank you. Through you, the warden, chat on to what Councillor Body has says. Even if it's not all 9 municipalities agreeing to line up that they're ready to tender at the same time, or that they're ready to purchase at the same time. But to put out that call, say, okay, we've determined, if we say here at Grey County, we've determined that the best time to do this is January. We really need to keep that ball moving. Who else out there is ready to do the same? So can we explore that, whether or not there could be an invitational chance? So if it doesn't make sense for all 9 municipalities in terms of when they're prepared to put their money where their mouth is, but to leave it open so that interested parties within our council table here could still participate. The heads up, make sure you've got your ducks lined up in a row, because Grey County's going to want to move on that tender at this particular time.
Thank you, Andrea. Pat, go ahead.
The one thing I did just would like to say is, like, for the very optimistic person, it seems like it should be quite easy, right? We're putting an asphalt tender. Well, so are we, you guys do it too. But then there's all those other things, like we all have different standards. Are our inspectors inspecting your roads? Are you providing inspector? We're using HL8 asphalt, you're using HL4. There's schedule A, B, C, D. We want to start one in May. You guys don't want to start one because of a bike race. So it seems like it'd be easy, but every new party that comes in just makes it that much more complicated. So maybe part of it is just like all municipalities, we're just trying to get our stuff done. We know it's got to get done and we're struggling. And that communication just grinds stuff to a halt sometimes. You got to meet, oh, I got to meet with them. Oh, wait, that guy's on vacation. Well, then, that type of thing, right? So ideally, in an ideal world, yes, we'd all be together in a room, we'd hammer out a project and we'd figure out what jobs are going together and we'd move forward, but it is difficult to do.
Councillor McQueen.
I think you probably work the best case scenarios whenever things work, whether they're jobs in the same area, whether you can work on the asphalt. I think more importantly, to make sure there's enough companies bidding. And I think we've seen 3 or 4 or 5 that seem to bid on the jobs. That's more important because if you only have 1 or 2, they either get full and then they're filled up and then they just give you a high price and then you're sort of stuck. So yeah, there's a lot of variables. I think it's a hard thing. Certainly, I know we have worked with asphalt and Grey Highlands that you're doing a job, we're doing a job. If it's just a straight road, but if it's more construction, well, then there's a lot of variables that come to fact. But I think our staff are working hard to work the best they can with our lower tiers for sure.
Yeah, I think from a perspective of, I don't want to overuse it, but together we're stronger. I think that communication piece is the most important part. And if you're in regular communication with the lower, the member municipalities, if you're ready to go and the lower tier isn't, well, then that's their loss. But I think that communication piece is really important. And I'm hoping, I know those conversations occur, but keep them going.
I'll just get Trevor to go through the budgets for the jobs budgeted for next year.
Okay, so in terms of road construction jobs we have for 2024, first one on our list is the Grey Road 4 and 3 roundabout. So again, that was budgeted in 2023. It's a carryover into 2024, and we've got the tender documents all ready to go. And it should go out either, we're just trying to decide before Christmas or after Christmas, which is more advantageous. And again, that job will be basically a road closure on Grey Road 3 on both north and south of Grey Road 4. So we're going to work with the contractor to make sure there's proper detour routes for the construction window. The next project we have is, let's see, Grey Road 7 is 2023. So Grey Road 9, pulverize and pave. That's from side road 7 to side road 13. Again, this is through the community of Hopeville. So we're going to grind and pave in Hopeville because a lot of the underground infrastructure is in good condition. So we're going to avoid additional infrastructure costs by leaving that there until it's a better suited time to replace. And then the road on both the east and west portion of Hopeville is in poor condition. So looking to do a pulverize and pave with some platform widening and the paved shoulders as well. That job's going to be partnered with Grey Road 14, which is from Grey Road 4 south to almost Southgate Road 24, but there's a trying to find sheet maybe. 265, yeah, for the map, yeah. Okay, so yeah, Grey Road 14 again is another pulverize and pave, and that is from Grey Road 4 down south to Southgate Road 24. And that one we are basically rebuilding what is there. There'll be a small paved shoulder, but not a full width that we're more standardized. The next project we have listed is in Grey Road 13, which is just north of Kimberley. Again, it's another pulverize and pave. That road suffering a lot from rutting, and can be quite dangerous in kind of a rainy weather situation. There's a lot of hydroplaning and just a safety concern that we're aware of, and we want to get that job done as soon as we can. Potentially partnered with that job will be Gray Road 30, which is the Lower Valley Road around Beaver Valley and up to Gray Road 13. That project, we have a few land issues where right now part of the road is actually on private property. So prior to reconstructing, we kind of got to sort those issues out. And generally, we've had good conversations so far, but again, they can always turn on a dime depending on how it goes. So we'll keep pushing those, and then ideally that job still gets tendered within the summer, but it may end up being one of those that just depends on how long those negotiations go. We might have to move that. But again, it's kind of in a state where it needs to go soon. So we're going to keep pressure on those land discussions. We have Gray Road 19 and 21 intersection upgrades. So this is, again, part of that over the full roundabouts and all the work going on in Blue Mountains. Next year's funding is basically going towards utility relocations and then also the relocation of the booster station. We've had even the pricing that's in here, we've had even more updates on the pricing for the booster station. So at some point we'll have to update that. But again, the booster station costs keep going up like crazy. So unfortunately, it is one of the elements that we're dealing with. The design's progressing and it should be into kind of a 60% design stage in the next month or two. And then we'll get a better idea of where we sit with the final costs there. Hydro relocations are planned for next year, as well as Rogersville, some gas as well, and then some F4 within closer to the intersection at 19 and 21. Yeah, so we actually will be bringing a report about 19 and 21, particularly about the booster station and past agreements and what we think would be a more relevant agreement now that we have an understanding of the development of the booster station project. What else do we have here? Gray Road 40. This is probably our biggest like rural road reconstruction job next year. It's between Gray Road 7 and Gray Road 13, which some of you know is kind of the massive hill down the escarpment as you head towards the Blue Mountains area. And with that job, it's going to be a bit of platform winding where we can, trying to improve safety. There's a few grade changes and some cuts, fills. Paved shoulders will also be incorporated there. So again, just one of our large jobs for next year, and we're really hoping that goes quite successfully. So finally, we have two structures that are on schedule for next year. The first is on Gray Road 9, just west of Gray Road 23. That structure was, again, both of these were actually on for last year, but were delayed. So this year we're going to be doing the structure on Gray Road 9. The other structure is, it's on the town line between Meaford and, Great Highlands, just off of the town line with Blue Mountains. So it's a town line bridge. It serves two local residents. It's basically a bridge to their driveways, unfortunately. And it's one of the bridges that we adopted with as a town line bridge. So it's a very unfortunate one to have, but it is failing and residents need to access their homes. So we're dealing with the design of that one. We're switching it to a culvert and trying to minimize the cost as much as possible. But again, it's a terrible location. It's a pretty significant waterway in the spring. So it's one of those things we're dealing with there. And then we talked about, or Pat's talked about the structuring culvert reserve. So those are the major projects for next year. Thanks for that.
Councillor McQueen, you were first, and then I'll come to Councillor Eccles.
You had a tendency to look to your right though, didn't you? I'll be short. I will say on my way up today, I came up Gray Road 7 and Gray Road 18. The projects that are currently done this year look great. I will make one note. I know that last year we did some projects that we didn't, I don't know what you call it, on the shoulder gravel, and I see that's done. I've seen it where those projects, the shoulder gravel, I don't know, it's like a spray coat on or whatever. I've seen it where it wasn't done last year and it's washed out in some places. So keep spraying it because it certainly holds it and looks good. But the roads that we've done just recently look really good. And but anyway, I just want to make that note.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Eccles.
Pat, you were talking about, forget which road it was down through into the valley, and part of the road's on private property, and getting purchasing of that. Obviously, there'll be a budgetary impact when it comes. Seems that some of the value of the land in different areas through the valley is at a considerably different price than what is in our land purchase. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we got into the county get into that problem with the roundabout on 3 and 4. Have we changed any of that purchase price in that policy, or have made compensation or made possible of that in this budget out and beyond what the policy is if it hasn't changed?
Through you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, good question. We haven't come back with a new land acquisition policy yet. That being said, we have a land acquisition budget that we had started years ago reserved. We will have enough. Well, we should have enough to buy all the land that we need for this year's projects or next year's. So we just haven't come back with that report. We've said it many times, that unit price we were offering, most people were not very happy with it. So there's some land acquisition things to go on policy with legal and clerks, and there's definitely some hill to climb there to get our policy a little better. But right now we are at the point where we do what we need to for expropriation. We have an assessment person evaluation that we use. And that's how we've still been going forward buying land. And we started the reserve early enough that we haven't been, and the land acquisition is slow enough that we have a decent reserve that we can just keep doing that.
The question not was whether we have enough in the reserve to satisfy the purchase. How far outside of the policy are you going to go to satisfy the purpose? Have you got enough flexibility within the policy to meet the purchase price? I guess what I'm saying is, policy is here. We've already just said we've got enough in here to do it. But can we do it within the policy framework? Or are you going to be, not that transportation has ever done this before, be outside the policy? They've always followed the policies and maintenance schedules perfectly, correct, Pat?
I appreciate that acknowledgement. Yeah, we'd be coming back. Like these will be enough that we'd probably be coming back to give an update on where they are. So I'm sure some of them will be outside the policy.
Dane, you have a question?
Thank you, Warden. Great Road 14 was mentioned doing the pulverizing and paving, and that we would not be.
No, we're not, you're not coming through, Dane, sorry.
I'm not sure why.
There you go, you're on now.
Okay, sorry, Warden. Gray Road 14 was mentioned doing the pulverized and repaving, and that we would not be extending the paved shoulders. Is that because of the work that's being done? Our policy is just doing like the maintenance standard is where we just keep the width of the road as is, and then it's during like a major reconstruction is when we do the paved shoulders. Just trying to get clarity on that.
Pat?
Sure, yeah. The for 14 specifically, it won't be that there won't be a paved shoulder. It just won't be a full 1.2 or 1.5 meter paved shoulder. It'll be a 0.6 meter, which is more typical for actual edge projection. It's one of the roads that's not on the cycling network. There's say like Old Order or Mennonite communities that jury still out whether they prefer a paved shoulder or the gravel shoulder with the horses and that. So basically, we're following kind of the cycling and trails master plan on that one, and mostly the paved shoulder is there to protect the road. So again, 0.6 is one of those it's about 2 feet. And generally that's enough to protect the edge shoulder from cracking and deterioration, whereas the additional is more built out for other potential uses, which we don't have them as much on this stretch of road, so.
Okay, Dane, good. Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden, and through you to Trevor. You mentioned, Trevor, about a bridge on a town line that services 2 homes. Have we looked at any alternative style bridges, prefab bridges, and whether or not there would be any application for those in that sort of scenario? Single lane bridges to something to reduce the cost?
Yeah, that is one of the things we've looked at. One of the situations with that one is particularly height of the structure above the river and the embankments. There's really, the abutments are really the major problem with that. So a lot of times when you get those kind of prefab structures, you can usually set them on either old abutments or a more stable situation, whereas this is one of those areas where we don't really have that. The bedrock's far enough down that's pretty hard to, by the time you build those abutments, the cost of those prefabs end up being the same as what we're going to do is putting in the culvert. And then with the culvert, the foundations for that can be a lot more minimal. It's considered not, it doesn't have to go down onto the bedrock as much as you would with a regular bridge structure. So.
Councillor Keaveney, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Borden. I did, but Councillor Mackey asked my question. There's a reason why he and I would be thinking in the same way.
All right, very good. Okay, carry on, gentlemen. Although I'll be mindful that it is 12:20 and lunch, I'm told, is here. So, we have a short planning report from Scott to go through before we'll go to that, but no, I'm kidding. Carry on.
You took my Scott joke. Onto machinery and equipment. So as you see, it is that old, zero budget. We're putting, it looks like a zero on some of the sheets. We're back to page 251, but it's us putting money in reserve and getting the money out for equipment. So we put some, as Kim had mentioned in her report, with some of the electric vehicles, we're still under, that path to go electric with vehicles that work for us. There's some that will not be electric based on current technology. But we're putting it off for now. We're getting some gas, half tons. And then we'll get the chargers in this year, and probably next year's budget will look different. But those 2 new pieces of equipment, I did want to mention something about the old bucket truck because I didn't mention it and the guys mentioned it, but some other things are just, and this is just a trial for us. Like we were going to get, and we can put it on, like, it's cut and I get it. It will be one of those things where we can't say, we have to hire a bucket truck to clear off a camera, for example. Like we have signal contractor who does stuff for us if there's something wrong with the signals, or so there is other uses that we think a used bucket truck would help us with. We haven't used it enough that we feel like buying a new one is the right thing to do. So eventually we'll see next year, we'll probably put a used bucket truck back in and start trying it out, see how it works. But we don't, we haven't used one, so we don't want to go all in on that. And the skid steer really is the one thing that kind of represented probably in our budget a major kind of level of service improvement. So our skid steer is very busy doing brushing at the edge of the road and stuff. We could keep 2 running all summer. So, but that would go above and beyond the level of service we're providing right now. So that is one that, it does fit to when budget times are tough, because it was really an increase in service. Yeah, and everything else there, that equipment innovation and non-licensed equipment budgets have been reduced a bit. They were going up quite a bit. We've reduced them. They're still there. There's still some money there.
Sorry, Councillor Greg.
Thanks, Warren. I'll just, one of the items what I was going to speak to was the used bucket truck. We just approximately a month ago approved direction for the purchase of a new bucket truck in our municipality, and we're going to assume that new bucket truck as early as 3 years from the next spring. So the question, I guess, I'm not certain in terms of the lower tier municipalities too, is there opportunities to access some of the other bucket trucks that are at times not in use from the lower tiers, and at least then the allocation is going back and forth between government resources and not flowing outside.
And I think we talked about that at our strat plan day too, like maybe sharing backups. Yeah, that would be great. Obviously, some of those, like you guys have a vac truck too, right? So some of those shared, again, same old thing. We need to communicate more and work more to get stronger together. Yeah, it would be nice to really take advantage of some of those for sure.
Councillor Body?
If I could make a motion then, to move that we receive a report back to council sometime before spring to explore options to use bucket trucks and other equipment and share services with lower tier governments. Just thinking, if we've got one and a bucket truck doesn't get used that often that we can't find a way to cooperate. So I'll put that on motion. If someone wants to second it, we'll get the report back and not get into the same discussion a year from now, having forgotten about it.
Thank you for that motion. I've got a seconder, Councillor Matrosovs. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor McQueen?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. It should be the same thing with chainsaws and going out and stuff. Then you have to get certified. Do we have to certify our staff to run these bucket trucks? Because I know it's like everything else. It's all that regulation that follows along. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of devils in details. There's no question about that. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor? That is carried. Pat?
You want me to just keep going? So I just have one brief thing, just being cognizant of time here. I just have two little things here. One is that the 10-year plan was attached in all the data you've got. So any questions about that, let us know. It's all in there, and pages and pages and pages of, numbers and jobs, et cetera, and the matching map. And I did want to mention, you'll notice on the map, every once in a while, there's a job that appears to have two colors on it, a road. So what that generally is we're paving a road, in 2024, and then we're doing a microsurface of it in 2030. So sometimes there's multiple treatments on the same road in the 10-year plan. Not that we don't think, it's never that we don't think the road's only gonna last 5 years. We're just doing that extra seal in year 5. So that, and the other one thing I really want to mention, which is could potentially be a huge thing, is nothing for the task force results are in here. So if there's, 45 million in needs that the county is adopting somehow because of these road exchanges, that is not listed in here. So that'll be a question that the new finance committee is going to deal with, and the task force, and we'll deal with that when, as it comes. But it's just worth remembering that, the underfundedness is going to get worse, probably, I think. So, but we're doing our best, always.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you. And I'll be quick with my last two questions because people are hungry. Regarding the one slide, page 258, there's a relationship or ratio of 1 to 3 for winter supervision and winter road maintenance. Wondered if you could just explain what the winter supervision speaks to in terms of being 1 to 3 in terms of the actual maintenance of roads seems to be high. As well, the last year we've had a pretty mild winter, so I'm just wondering if surpluses occur in that department, winter maintenance. Do they go back into a reserve, or do they just go into like the working funds for the county? And then last question is there a program that's even small in nature where we support farmers by leaving crops on the roadsides? Because I'd like to know more about that, and I think probably tree planting, hedgerows might be a better use of the funds. I think of a road, I'm not sure the county road down at the warden would know it. But weaving once from over by Grand Valley and going north, it was a wide open road to drive on and kind of nasty. So it struck me as tree planting would be advantageous as something to pursue there. So just want to know more about that program if it's in this document here.
Well, I can answer the question 2 and 3 first, I guess. And I'll let him deal with the kind of the ratio there a little bit, but thanks. Mayor.
Just, I'm not too sure, but I think Kelvin has to have to answer the winter supervision. I think that includes the patrollers and all the winter supervision we have, so that's why it's all the patrol stuff or.
Oh, so that'd be 20, that's a 24-hour patrollers are in there all winter, so they're driving around all winter, telling the plow operators what to do.
And secondly, I can send you the report that we did at last council for the corn row. Now we pay farmers for the corn rows, and then that there's replantings as well. So I can send you that report for that.
And the other thing is just as far as the reserve, yeah, we would have like our end of the year surplus. There is a winter reserve of 500,000 just for that we haven't really tapped into, I think, in quite a while. But just for that nightmare 1996 type winter, right? That we wouldn't have to cancel a whole bunch of construction projects. So that is there. Whether $500,000 enough if they got that kind of winter, I don't know, but it's in there.
It'll be enough for today. Kim, did you want to add something?
I think you mentioned it, Jim, but it's living snow fence, right? We have a living snow fence program and you do have people participating in that, right?
We have 7 or 8 people involved in that now, and a few more are interested. And then we have one farmer on Gray Road 40 that's doing a trial for us with snow, with leaving the corn rows. So it worked well last year. It drifted quite well, not on other roads. So it's something we're trying as well. So I think we have $5,000 in our budget for tree planting.
Councillor Mattress, and then I'll go to Randy at the back there.
Thank you. Through you, the warden. That again is a good conversation to have in coordination with municipalities because we've been exploring the living snow fence concepts as well and have learned a lot along the way, like how far into a farmer's field it has to be planted in order for it to actually, the physics for it to actually be viable. Unfortunately, we are not England where you can just have these long corridors of hedgerows and keep the snow out. It actually does the opposite when you do that. So we've learned a lot, and let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's keep talking about it, because when there are trials and successes, we want to know about those results as fast as you can tell us too, because it's affecting all of our rural area. Thank you.
Randy?
Just further to the comments from Councillor Madrasov, we've been having some discussions with the Climate Change Community Practice, which is made up of all the member municipal staff that's represented from each of the 9 municipalities. And this is one program that we definitely see merit in, it helps us obviously reduce our winter maintenance costs, liabilities, plus it helps check off boxes in terms of tree planting from a climate change perspective. So we would definitely want to investigate this further, and there's definitely interest amongst all the 9 local municipalities to do that and how we can share best practices, plus also look for grant funding opportunities to help just enhance that program that Jim and his team have successfully started, and see if we can enhance that going forward in partnership with transportation services and our local municipalities.
Thanks, Randy. Hey, Pat. Done? Oh, Councillor McQueen, my apologies.
Not a problem, Mr. Warner, but very quick there. We did do a project on Gray Road 7 north of 40 a few years back. That is a living planting tree. But I think moving forward, probably with climate change is more than just snow fencing for the purpose of snow, but moisture retention as well. There's a lot of things around planting trees and preventing drying out of land and stuff like that. So there's maybe thinking moving forward, just not just for snow retention.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Apples.
Not a question, but just as an addition to that, of helping the agricultural community. I know it's probably 8 or 9 years ago. There was a farmer between, I guess it's on the county line between Hanover and Newstead. The wrap bales right there on the curve, just past the conservation, the old Sulphur Springs. Put that, did their bale wrapping and ran it right up around on that curve, and it was very successful. Now, the next year he had the field in soybeans, so wasn't as much chance of getting wrapped hay bales. But working with I see Mr. Robertson still here, how the farming community can help out our transportation department, and that may be one of the aspects as well too.
Thank you. Anything else anybody wants to? For now, at least? No, everybody's ready for lunch, I suspect. All right, thank you, Pat, appreciate, and Jim and Trevor, thank you very much, and everyone else from TAPS there. Okay, it's 12:35. Perhaps we could be back by 1:15 or something of that nature, so we'll recess until then.